Ladies and gentlemen, let me begin with a truth that touches every one of us. Fear is no respecter of persons. It comes to the rich and the poor, the young and the old, the strong and the weak. It creeps into the heart in the dead of night, whispering doubt, magnifying problems and chaining us with anxiety. You cannot live in this world without facing fear. But I am here to tell you today there is a power greater than fear, and it is found in prayer. Now, listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you can change the way you face every battle in your life. Courage is not something you can buy in a marketplace. It's not something you can fake with a smile or hide behind a mask. True courage is born from a deeper source, a wellspring that never runs dry, and that source is prayer. When fear comes against you like a flood, prayer is the dam that holds it back. When fear tells you that you are finished, prayer whispers that you have only just begun. When fear says you are alone, prayer reminds you that heaven itself stands with you. Prayer is not just a ritual, it is your lifeline to courage. Some of you are sitting here today, trembling on the inside, hiding battles no one else can see. You've asked yourself, how can I go on? How can I stand when everything around me is falling apart? My friend, prayer is the answer. Not empty words, not shallow phrases, but heartfelt prayer that reaches beyond your weakness and taps into divine strength. Think about it. Fear paralyzes, but prayer mobilizes. Fear makes you shrink back, but prayer pushes you forward. Fear robs your sleep, but prayer restores your peace. Prayer turns trembling hands into steady hands, bowed heads into lifted heads, weak voices into declarations of faith. I remember a man who once told me, I was facing the darkest moment of my life. My heart was gripped with fear. I thought I had no way out. But I fell on my knees and prayed, and when I rose again, nothing around me had changed, but everything inside me had changed. I was no longer afraid. I was ready to fight, ready to endure, ready to win. That's the miracle of prayer. It may not always change the circumstance immediately, but it always changes you. So today I challenge you, the next time fear knocks at your door, let prayer answer. When fear whispers failure, let prayer declare victory. When fear surrounds you, let prayer lift you higher. For courage is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of prayer that turns fear into faith. And if you walk out of here today with only one thing in your heart, let it be this: prayer does not just bring courage. It makes you unshakable in the face of fear. It builds a courage that no storm can break, no trial can destroy, and no enemy can defeat. Fear is one of the most common threads that weaves through the fabric of every human life. It is not confined to a certain age group, gender, or background. It does not discriminate between the wealthy and the poor, the strong and the weak, the successful and the struggling. From the moment we open our eyes to the realities of this world, fear stands nearby, waiting for an opportunity to whisper its dark message into our minds. It comes when the future is uncertain, when the doctor gives a diagnosis that shakes the soul, when financial burdens pile up, when relationships fracture, or when we stand on the edge of something new, unsure of what lies ahead. Fear is universal, and because of that, it cannot be ignored. It cannot be brushed aside as though it belongs only to a select few. Every heart in this room knows what it is to be afraid. But here is the truth we often miss. Courage is not the absence of fear. Many believe that courageous people are those who simply never feel afraid, that they are somehow made of a different substance, immune to the trembling and uncertainty that plagues the rest of us. That is a lie. The bravest men and women throughout history felt the icy grip of fear just as much as anyone else. What set them apart was not that they avoided fear, but that they learned how to rise in the face of it. They learned that true courage is not pretending fear does not exist, but moving forward even while fear screams its loudest. Think about this for a moment. If fear were absent, there would be no need for courage at all. Courage exists only because fear exists. Courage is born in the battle. It is forged in the furnace of uncertainty when everything in you wants to run, but something greater inside of you refuses to quit. When fear stands tall, courage must stand taller. That is why courage is so valuable, because it is the only weapon that can silence the lies fear speaks into the human soul. Yet fear has a peculiar way of disguising itself. Sometimes it comes openly, in the trembling of the hands, the racing of the heart, the sleepless nights that rob our peace. But other times, fear cloaks itself in excuses. It makes us say, I'm just being realistic, when in truth we are afraid to take the risk. It makes us say, I'll wait for a better time, when in reality we are afraid of failing today. Fear convinces us to settle for less, to hide our talents, to silence our voices, to stay in the comfort zone rather than step into the unknown. Fear is a master deceiver, and unless we recognize it for what it is, it will paralyze us without our even knowing it. I want you to consider how many opportunities have been lost in your life because of fear. How many times have you felt a dream stirring in your heart, a vision of something greater, only to silence it with the thought, what if I fail? How many doors have remained unopened because fear convinced you they would lead to disaster? Fear is not just an emotion. It is a thief. It robs you of tomorrow's possibilities by chaining you to yesterday's doubts. It robs you of courage by magnifying your weakness and minimizing your strength. And if you let it, fear will define the boundaries of your life. But courage is different. Courage is the force that refuses to be caged. Courage is the voice that says, yes, I am afraid, but I will not let fear dictate my destiny. Courage is the power that allows a person to look into the face of uncertainty and still take the next step. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes it is the quiet strength that gets you out of bed in the morning when everything inside you wants to give up. Sometimes courage is the decision to try again after failing. Sometimes courage is standing alone when everyone else has walked away. What makes courage even more extraordinary is that it has the power to inspire others. Fear isolates, but courage unites. When one person stands in courage, others see it and find strength to rise as well. Think about the times in your life when you saw someone face a storm with unshakable resolve. Their courage became your courage. Their strength became your strength. Courage multiplies itself. It is contagious. And when it is fueled by prayer, it becomes unstoppable. But you cannot wait for the perfect moment to be courageous, because that moment will never come. Fear will always present you with reasons to delay, reasons to hide, reasons to shrink back. Courage must be chosen in the middle of fear. It is not born out of perfect circumstances, but out of imperfect ones. It is not waiting for the storm to pass. It is learning to stand in the middle of the storm with your head lifted high. The truth is, courage is not a gift handed to you. It is a decision you must make. And that decision is tested most when fear is strongest. There are countless stories of people who discovered this reality. Men and women who, by all accounts, should have been crushed under the weight of fear, but instead rose with courage that defied explanation. Their lives remind us that courage is not reserved for the extraordinary, but is available to anyone who chooses it. And if it was available to them, it is available to you. You are not excluded. You are not too weak, too broken, or too afraid to walk in courage. The same courage that sustained them can sustain you. The question you must ask yourself is this: what will you allow to rule your life? Fear or courage? Fear will keep you bound, but courage will set you free. Fear will tell you to retreat, but courage will compel you to advance. Fear will say you cannot, but courage will declare you can. And the moment you choose courage, fear begins to lose its grip. So when fear rises within you, let it serve as a signal that courage is required. Do not despise the presence of fear, for it is the very soil in which courage grows. Instead of seeing fear as your enemy, see it as the stage upon which your courage will shine the brightest. Every time fear knocks on your door, you have the choice to answer with trembling or to answer with strength. And the beautiful truth is this: no matter how many times fear has won in the past, today is a new day and courage is waiting for you to choose it. Fear is powerful, yes, but it is not all powerful. Courage, once chosen, can break every chain fear tries to fasten around your life. And if you want to live fully, if you want to rise into the destiny that is waiting for you, you must learn to say, I feel fear, but I choose courage. That choice will not only trump prayer as one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. To many, it appears as nothing more than a ritual, a tradition, or a desperate cry sent up when all else has failed. To some, it looks like words spoken into empty air with no guarantee that anyone is listening. But those who have tasted the power of prayer know it is far more than a ritual. It is a lifeline, a source of strength that sustains the soul in the moments when human strength fails. Prayer is not about eloquence, not about memorized phrases or carefully crafted words. Prayer is about connection. It is about touching something greater than yourself. It is about drawing courage, wisdom, and peace from a source that never runs dry. Think about it for a moment. Where does a person turn when they have exhausted their own strength? Where do you go when your best ideas are not enough, when your physical strength is spent, when your emotions are frayed, and when every earthly resource has failed you? That is the place where prayer begins. Prayer is the bridge between human limitation and divine possibility. Prayer takes what you cannot carry and places it in the hands of the one who can. It is in that sacred exchange that courage is born, because you realize you are not fighting your battles alone. Fear thrives in isolation. It tells you that you are abandoned, that no one sees your struggle, that no one can help you. But prayer breaks through that loneliness and reminds you that you are never alone. The very act of praying shifts your focus away from your weakness and onto a higher power. Fear says, you can't. Prayer answers, God can. Fear says, you are finished. Prayer declares, this is not the end. Fear says, you are powerless. Prayer proclaims, you are connected to unlimited strength. That is why prayer is not passive. It is powerful. It is not retreat. It is reinforcement. It is not weakness. It is the weapon that turns trembling into triumph. Have you ever noticed how after genuine prayer, the circumstances outside of you may remain unchanged, but something inside of you shifts? The storm may still be raging, the challenge may still be staring you in the face, but there is a calmness, a courage, and a clarity that was not there before. That is the mystery of prayer. It may not always change what is happening around you immediately, but it changes what is happening within you, and that makes all the difference. The strongest warriors are not those who never felt afraid, but those who learned to kneel in prayer and rise with unshakable courage. When you kneel in prayer, you are not just speaking words, you are plugging into a source of strength that cannot be measured. Imagine a lamp trying to light up a dark room without being connected to electricity. It may be beautifully designed, polished, and ready to shine, but without connection, it remains dark and powerless. The moment it is plugged into the power source, everything changes. The room is illuminated. The darkness is pushed back. Prayer works the same way. You may have talents, skills, and gifts, but without connection to the true source of strength, you will remain powerless in the face of fear. The moment you connect through prayer, light floods the darkness, and you find courage you did not know you had. Prayer also has the remarkable ability to bring clarity in moments of confusion. Fear loves confusion. It thrives on uncertainty. It multiplies in the fog of indecision. But prayer cuts through that fog like the morning sun piercing the clouds. It gives you perspective. It reminds you that you do not have to have all the answers today. It reassures you that the one who holds tomorrow also holds you. And with that reassurance, you find the courage to take the next step, even if you cannot see the entire path ahead. I remember hearing the story of a woman who had reached the end of her rope. Everything in her life seemed to be falling apart at the same time. Fear gripped her like a vice, and she admitted that she did not know how she could go on another day. Then one night in desperation, she prayed. It was not a long, eloquent prayer. It was not careful rehearsed. It was raw, honest, and full of tears. She simply cried out, "Help me!" And in that moment, she said she felt a peace she could not explain. The problems did not vanish overnight, but something changed within her. Her fear loosened its grip, her heart steadied, and she rose with the strength to keep going. That is the power of prayer. It may not eliminate every problem in an instant, but it equips you with courage to face the problem until the answer comes. There are those who may laugh at prayer, dismissing it as wishful thinking. But even the skeptics cannot deny the transformation that occurs in those who pray. Prayer does not make you weak, it makes you strong. It does not detach you from reality, it equips you to face reality with courage. It does not remove the storm, but it anchors you so you are not destroyed by the storm. That is why people who pray sincerely have an unshakable calm about them. They may be walking through the fire, but they are not consumed. They may be surrounded by fear, but they are not ruled by it. Prayer has given them courage that cannot be explained by natural means. You see, fear is loud, it shouts, it intimidates, it overwhelms. But prayer is louder. Prayer has a way of quieting the voice of fear, drowning it out with the assurance of faith. When you pray, you are speaking to the one who has authority over fear. You are aligning yourself with a strength far greater than your own, and that strength fills you with courage to face what once seemed impossible. So I want you to understand this today. Prayer is not the last resort. It is the first line of defense. It is not the place you go when all else has failed. It is the place you go before you take a single step. Because when you start with prayer, you start with courage. When you start with prayer, you start with strength. When you start with prayer, fear loses its power over you. If you have ever wondered how to find courage in the times when fear surrounds you, the answer is closer than you think. It is as close as your next prayer. It does not have to be long. It does not have to be eloquent. It does not have to be perfect. It just has to be real. And when you pray, when you open your heart and connect with the source of all strength, you will discover courage rising within you like a river breaking through a dam. That courage will not come from your own strength, but it will sustain you in ways you never thought possible. So do not underestimate the power of prayer. Do not dismiss it as something small or insignificant. It is the most powerful source of courage you will ever know. It will hold you when fear tries to break you. It will lift you when fear tries to bury you. It will empower you to rise when fear says you cannot. And once you have tasted that strength, you will never again walk into battle without it. Transform your life. It will transform the lives of everyone who watches you rise in the face of fear. Fear is one of the most draining forces a human being can experience. It doesn't just trouble the mind, it weakens the body, it steals the will, and it paralyzes the spirit. Fear has a way of magnifying problems, making them appear larger than they really are, until the weight of them feels unbearable. It can make you feel powerless even when you are not, hopeless even when hope is still within reach. Fear drains energy like a thief that sneaks into your home in the night, stripping you of strength while you sleep. You wake up feeling exhausted before the day has even begun, not because of what you physically carried, but because of the burden fear laid on your heart. When fear grips you, you begin to doubt yourself. You question your ability to make decisions. You hesitate when you should act. Fear whispers lies that you are not good enough, not strong enough, not capable enough. And the more you listen to those lies, the weaker you become. It doesn't just paralyze your present, it sabotages your future. Fear convinces you to avoid risk, to stay in the comfort zone, to bury your talents instead of using them. It slowly eats away at confidence until all that is left is hesitation. And hesitation is the breeding ground for regret. But where fear weakens, prayer empowers. Prayer is the force that breaks the chains of hesitation and restores confidence in the heart. Prayer is not an escape from reality. It is an empowerment to face reality with courage. When you pray, you are drawing strength from a well that never runs dry. Prayer replenishes what fear has drained. It restores what fear has stolen. It takes the shaky foundation of doubt and replaces it with the solid ground of faith. Prayer empowers you to rise above circumstances that once seemed impossible because it realigns your focus. Instead of staring endlessly at the size of your problem, prayer reminds you of the size of your source of strength. The empowerment that comes through prayer is not a vague feeling. It is tangible. It is real. Have you ever felt the weight of fear pressing so heavily upon you that you could barely breathe, and then after prayer, something shifted inside? The weight didn't disappear immediately, but suddenly you felt lighter. Your shoulders straightened, your heartbeat steadied, your mind cleared. That is the empowerment of prayer. It doesn't always remove the battle, but it equips you for the battle. And when you are equipped, you stop shrinking back and begin moving forward. Fear is a master of imagination. It paints pictures in your mind of everything that could go wrong. It shows you failure before you have even tried. It convinces you that the worst possible outcome is not only possible, but inevitable. But prayer transforms imagination into vision. Where fear paints images of defeat, prayer paints images of victory. Where fear plays endless movies of loss, prayer gives glimpses of hope. And hope, once birthed in the heart, produces courage. That is why prayer is the great antidote to fear. It doesn't just silence fear's lies, it replaces them with truth that fuels courage. Consider this: when fear weakens you, it isolates you. It makes you feel like you are the only one going through the struggle, like no one could possibly understand your battle. That loneliness intensifies the weakness, because you believe you must fight with your own limited strength. But prayer shatters that isolation. It reminds you that you are not alone. It brings the awareness that divine presence is with you, surrounding you, strengthening you, lifting you when you cannot lift yourself. The moment you realize you are not alone, courage rises. Prayer empowers by reestablishing connection, by pulling you out of isolation and into communion with a power greater than yourself. Fear also weakens the voice of purpose within you. It drowns out the dreams that once burned brightly. It silences the calling you once felt. Fear makes you settle for less, convincing you that playing small is safer than risking failure. But prayer rekindles the fire of purpose. In prayer, dreams are resurrected. In prayer, visions are revived. In prayer, courage returns to pursue what fear tried to bury. Suddenly, you find yourself saying, "I can do this. I will not give up. I will not let fear steal my destiny." That is the power of empowerment that prayer provides. Let me give you an image to hold on to. Imagine a strong tree standing tall in the middle of a violent storm. The wind howls, the rain pounds, the branches bend. On the surface, it looks like the tree might break, but the tree stands because its roots run deep. Those roots draw strength from a hidden source underground, invisible to the eye, but essential for survival. Prayer is like those roots. Fear may be the storm battering your life, but prayer keeps you rooted and empowered, drawing from a source no storm can touch. The deeper your prayer, the stronger your stance. I remember hearing about a man who faced a devastating loss that left him feeling broken and afraid. He admitted that fear consumed him. Every thought was filled with worst-case scenarios. He could hardly move forward with his life. But then he turned to prayer. At first, he said it felt like nothing was happening. But he kept praying. Day after day, he poured out his heart, and slowly, courage began to return. His steps grew stronger. His decisions grew bolder. His outlook changed from despair to hope. He said, "Prayer gave me back my strength." That testimony is not unique. It is the story of countless souls who have found that where fear weakens, prayer empowers. The truth is, you cannot fight fear with human strength alone. Human strength has limits. It runs out. It breaks down. It grows weary. But prayer taps into divine strength that has no limits. That is why prayer empowers in ways nothing else can. It doesn't just give you a temporary boost. It gives you a well of strength that renews daily. When fear tells you that you are at the end of your rope, prayer hands you a new rope, stronger than the first. When fear says you cannot endure another day, prayer gives you fresh endurance for tomorrow. So many people live their lives weakened by fear, never realizing that empowerment was always within their reach through prayer. They allow fear to dictate their decisions, to limit their dreams, to shrink their lives. But the moment they turn to prayer, everything changes. They discover courage they didn't know they had. They find strength they thought was gone forever. They rise in empowerment, no longer victims of fear, but victors over it. And so I say to you, never underestimate the weakening power of fear, but also never underestimate the empowering force of prayer. Fear will drain you until you can barely stand, but prayer will fill you until you can soar. Fear will whisper that you are defeated, but prayer will shout that you are more than a conqueror. Fear will weaken your hands, but prayer will strengthen your grip. Fear will silence your voice, but prayer will give you words of power. And once you have tasted that empowerment, you will never again let fear have the final word. There is nothing more powerful, nothing more convincing than the undeniable evidence of a life that has been transformed. People can debate ideas, argue philosophies, and question beliefs, but they cannot deny a story that has been lived in a life that has been changed. And that is what prayer does. It transforms lives in ways that no human effort, no self-help system, no motivational slogan could ever achieve. When a person truly touches God through prayer, something happens inside that cannot be explained away. Fear loses its grip, courage rises, and what once seemed impossible suddenly becomes possible. Real life transformation through prayer is not just theory, it is reality. All through history, in every culture and every nation, men and women have discovered this truth. People who were on the edge of despair, ready to give up, found new life because of prayer. People who had no strength to continue somehow stood tall again because of prayer. Entire communities facing disaster were sustained by the power of prayer. If you strip away the noise of the world and look closely, you will find countless testimonies of lives changed in their darkest hour, not by wealth, not by influence, not by intellect, but by the simple act of turning to God in prayer. There was once a young man I heard about who had fallen so deeply into fear and anxiety that he could barely function. Every day was a battle just to get out of bed. He lived with constant dread, his mind paralyzed by thoughts of failure, shame, and defeat. Doctors did what they could, friends tried to encourage him, but the fear seemed stronger than anything else. Then one night, broken and desperate, he prayed for the first time in months. He had no fancy words, no rehearsed lines. All he could whisper was, "God help me." And in that moment, he felt something shift. He described it later as a warmth, a peace, a presence that filled his heart. The next day, his problems were still there, but the crushing fear was gone. He had the courage to take one step forward, then another, and slowly, day by day, his life was restored. He will tell you to this day it was not therapy alone, it was not willpower alone, it was prayer that transformed him from a man paralyzed by fear to a man living in courage. I have met people who faced devastating losses, loss of family, loss of income, loss of health, and by every measure, they should have been broken beyond repair. Fear should have consumed them, despair should have ended their story. Yet they rose again. They stood when standing seemed impossible. And when you ask them how, their answer is the same prayer. They will tell you prayer gave them a strength they did not possess on their own. Prayer gave them courage to face tomorrow when they did not even want to live through today. That is transformation. That is the miracle only prayer can bring. Even in the pages of history, you will find evidence of nations and leaders who were sustained through prayer. Entire generations facing wars, famines, and plagues turned to prayer and found courage to endure. Communities that were paralyzed by fear discovered unity, hope, and strength through prayer. When human resources were not enough, when leaders had no answers, when fear threatened to collapse entire societies, prayer made the difference. And still today, in the private battles of the heart and the public battles of the world, prayer continues to transform lives in ways too numerous to count. What makes prayer so transformative is that it works from the inside out. Most solutions try to fix external circumstances first, but prayer changes the internal condition of the heart. When the heart is transformed, everything else begins to shift. Fear is driven out from within, and courage begins to flow like a river. A person who has been changed from the inside will eventually see change on the outside. That is why you can take two people in the exact same situation, one who is gripped by fear, the other who has prayed, and their responses will be completely different. The one who prays will find courage to keep moving, while the one who refuses remains trapped. Prayer makes all the difference because it transforms you before it transforms the situation. Some of you know this truth firsthand. You have lived through nights of fear when you thought you could not make it until morning. You have carried burdens so heavy that you felt they would crush you. You have walked into rooms filled with uncertainty, not knowing how you would survive. But you prayed, and something happened. You walked out with peace. You stood taller. You breathed easier. That was transformation. It may not have been dramatic to the outside world, but to you it was the difference between giving up and going on. That is what prayer does. It makes survivors into overcomers, victims into victors, cowards into warriors. There is a story of a woman who lost her only child in a tragic accident. The pain was unbearable. The fear of living without her child consumed her. For months she could barely speak, eat, or function. Friends and family tried to comfort her, but nothing worked. One night, in her brokenness, she prayed. She wept, she cried, she poured out her pain. And in that prayer, something happened. She felt comfort for the first time. She felt strength begin to rise. She would later say, prayer didn't take away my loss, but it gave me the courage to live again. That is transformation. The circumstances did not change, but she was changed. She found courage to keep living when fear told her she couldn't. We often think of transformation as something dramatic, but sometimes the most powerful transformations are the quiet ones. A person who could not sleep because of fear suddenly rests in peace after prayer. A man who doubted his worth suddenly walks in confidence after prayer. A woman who thought she was finished suddenly rises with fresh strength after prayer. These are the miracles that happen every day, unseen by the world, but undeniable to the one who experienced them. That is why stories of transformation through prayer will never cease to be told, because they are happening every single day. And if you doubt it, perhaps it is because you have not yet experienced it for yourself. But I promise you this, when you truly pray, when you pour out your fear and connect with the source of all strength, you will not remain the same. Transformation is inevitable. Fear cannot remain where prayer is active. Courage will always rise when prayer is present. And your story, too, can become a testimony of transformation, one that no one can deny. So when fear grips you, when you feel weak, when your life seems shattered, remember the countless lives that have been changed through prayer. Let their testimonies remind you that you are not the exception. If prayer could transform them, prayer can transform you. Do not give up. Do not surrender to fear. Do not believe the lie that you are too far gone. Transformation is possible, and it begins the moment you pray. Fear and faith cannot occupy the same space. One will always push out the other. Fear comes to cloud your vision, to distort reality, and to convince you that defeat is certain. It magnifies every problem and shrinks every solution. It paralyzes you before the battle has even begun. But prayer has the unique power to reframe fear into faith. Prayer does not deny the existence of fear, it transforms it. Prayer takes the same situation that once filled you with terror and allows you to see it through a new lens. It shifts your perspective from the weakness of man to the strength of God, from impossibility to possibility, from despair to hope. When fear whispers, you cannot, prayer rises and declares, with God, all things are possible. When fear says, you are alone, prayer reminds you that heaven is backing you. When fear shouts that the storm is too strong, prayer answers that even the winds and the waves obey the voice of God. Prayer reframes the entire narrative. It doesn't ignore the problem. It changes how you see it. And once your perspective changes, courage begins to rise. You see, fear is fueled by focus. Whatever you fix your eyes upon grows larger in your mind. If you focus only on the storm looks unbeatable. If you focus only on your weakness feels overwhelming. But prayer shifts your focus. Instead of staring endlessly at the size of your fear, you begin to see the size of your faith. Instead of being consumed by the shadow of the problem, you are filled with the light of divine promise. And suddenly, what once looked like a wall blocking your path now looks like a door waiting to be opened. That is the reframing power of prayer. There was once a man who faced a life-threatening diagnosis. The doctors told him there was little hope. Fear immediately gripped his heart. Every thought was filled with images of death, of loss, of his family suffering without him. He could not escape the fear no matter how hard he tried, but then he began to pray. At first his prayer was filled with desperation, but as he continued, something began to change. The more he prayed, the less he saw the size of his illness, and the more he saw the size of God's power. The diagnosis did not disappear overnight, but his perspective shifted. He no longer walked in fear of dying. He walked in faith that his life was in God's hands. That faith gave him courage to fight, courage to endure treatments, courage to live with joy in the middle of struggle. Prayer reframed his fear into faith, and that faith carried him farther than fear ever could. Fear is loud. It shouts failure before you begin. It screams defeat before you try. It paints dark pictures in your imagination, showing you everything that could go wrong. But prayer answers with a louder voice. Prayer speaks truth to lies. It paints pictures of victory, of overcoming, of breakthrough. Prayer reclaims your imagination from fear and fills it with vision. That is why people who pray often seem unshaken by circumstances that terrify others. It's not that they don't feel fear, but that their fear has been reframed by faith. Prayer doesn't just change what you see, it changes how you walk. Fear will make you retreat, but faith will move you forward. Fear will make you hide, but faith will make you step out boldly. Fear says, stay where you are, it's safer. Faith says, step into the unknown, for God goes before you. Fear makes you grip tightly to what you have, afraid to lose it. Faith makes you open your hands, knowing that God can provide more. That transformation happens in prayer. It is in prayer that you let go of fear's grip and receive the courage to walk in faith. Think about how powerful this shift truly is. A person bound by fear will see every obstacle as a reason to stop. But once that fear is reframed into faith through prayer, those same obstacles become opportunities to prove what God can do. The mountain that once intimidated you becomes the mountain that will testify of your victory. The valley that once frightened you becomes the valley where your courage is forged. Prayer doesn't remove the challenges, but it changes how you see them, and when you see differently, you live differently. I remember a woman who had always dreamed of starting her own business, but fear held her back for years. Fear told her she was not qualified, not smart enough, not capable of succeeding. She stayed in jobs that drained her soul, settling for less than what she was capable of. Then one day, in prayer, she asked for courage. She prayed not only for doors to open, but for her heart to believe it was possible. And something happened. Her fear was reframed. Instead of seeing all the reasons why she would fail, she began to see the reasons why she could succeed. Instead of believing she was unqualified, she believed that she was equipped. That faith gave her courage to step out, and today she runs a thriving business. The difference was not just opportunity, it was the transformation that came through prayer. That is what prayer does. It reframes your thoughts, your outlook, your entire life. Fear looks at giants and says, they are too big to fight. Faith looks at the same giants and says, they are too big to miss. Fear looks at the storm and says, we will sink. Faith looks at the storm and says, we will get to the other side. Fear sees the walls of Jericho and says, they cannot fall. Faith walks around the walls and declares, they will fall at the sound of God's command. The facts don't change, but the perspective does, and perspective is everything. Fear is a prison. It locks you into a small, narrow world where you are too afraid to move. Prayer is the key that unlocks that prison and sets you free. It gives you the faith to walk into wide open spaces, to dream again, to believe again, to live again. Without prayer, fear defines your boundaries. With prayer, faith expands your borders. And when faith takes the place of fear, courage becomes your daily companion. So the next time fear tries to dominate your heart, take it to prayer. Pour it out. Don't hide it, don't bury it, don't pretend it's not there. Place it before God in prayer and watch what happens. Fear will begin to shrink and faith will begin to grow. Fear will lose its voice and faith will start speaking louder. Fear will try to cage you, but faith will set you free. Prayer is the bridge that carries you from fear into faith, and on that bridge, courage will rise in you until you can face anything with confidence. That is why people who pray are people of courage. They do not deny the presence of fear, but they refuse to be defined by it. They have learned the secret prayer reframes everything. What once looked like the end now looks like a beginning. What once felt like a curse now feels like a stepping stone. What once terrified them now excites them. And that is not human optimism, that is the supernatural work of prayer turning fear into faith. So let me say it clearly, fear will always come, but it does not have to stay. Prayer has the power to reframe it, to transform it, to replace it with faith that will sustain you through every storm. And when fear has been reframed into faith, courage will no longer be something you are searching for. It will be something you are living in every single day. Courage that comes from human strength can falter, but courage that is born out of prayer is unshakable. Human courage may stand for a moment, but when the pressure becomes too great, it bends and breaks. Prayer, however, gives rise to a courage that is rooted not in what you can do, but in what God can do through you. It is a courage that does not crumble in the face of rejection, does not retreat in the presence of danger, and does not collapse when the weight of the world bears down. Prayer establishes you on a foundation so firm that even the fiercest storms cannot wash it away. It is in prayer that your heart is anchored to the eternal, and when your anchor is set in the eternal, no temporary trial can uproot you. Think about the disciples of Jesus, men who were once fearful and uncertain, hiding behind locked doors after his crucifixion. They were paralyzed by the thought of persecution, afraid that what had happened to their master would happen to them. But then they prayed. They prayed together in one accord, and when the Spirit of God filled them, something changed. The same men who had cowered in fear now stood boldly before rulers and authorities, declaring their faith without hesitation. What happened? Prayer transformed weak men into strong witnesses. Prayer gave them a courage that no threat, no prison, no sword could take away. That is what unshakable courage looks like. It does not mean you are never afraid. It means fear no longer controls you. There is a difference between borrowed courage and born courage. Borrowed courage relies on circumstances. When things are going well, you feel strong, but when difficulties come, your confidence disappears. Born courage is different. Born in the secret place of prayer, it grows roots so deep that it does not depend on what is happening around you. You can be in the middle of a storm, yet remain calm. You can be surrounded by opposition, yet remain steadfast. You can be facing loss, yet still declare that you will overcome. This kind of courage cannot be shaken because it was not built on sand. It was built on the rock of prayer. Consider those moments in your life when fear seemed too powerful to overcome. Perhaps it was when you faced a diagnosis, when you walked through financial hardship, when you stood on the edge of a decision that could change everything. In those moments, fear tried to consume you. It told you to quit, to run, to give up. But then you prayed. And in that sacred conversation with God, you found something you did not have before. You found a strength that did not come from within yourself. You found a peace that made no sense in the middle of chaos. You found the courage to move forward when everything in you wanted to shrink back. That courage did not come from human effort. It came from prayer. Unshakable courage is not loud. It does not need to boast or prove itself. It is steady, quiet, and enduring. It is the courage of someone who knows deep in their soul that no matter what happens, they will not be abandoned. Prayer places that assurance within you. Each time you pray, you are reminded that you are not alone. You are reminded that the one who created the universe hears you, knows you, and walks with you. With that knowledge, how can fear rule you? How can intimidation silence you? How can trials defeat you? When you carry that truth in your spirit, you stand with unshakable courage no matter the battle you face. Think of a soldier standing on the battlefield, outnumbered and outmatched. By human calculation, defeat is certain. But if that soldier knows that the King of Kings stands at his side, fear loses its grip. Prayer creates that awareness in your heart. It is in prayer that you realize the power that is for you is greater than the power against you. It is in prayer that your vision clears and you begin to see that you are not fighting alone. When that realization sinks deep into your spirit, courage rises within you like a fire that cannot be put out. That fire sustains you through long nights, through discouragement, through setbacks. That fire is unshakable courage, and it is ignited in the furnace of prayer. History is filled with people who stood with unshakable courage because they were anchored in prayer. Men and women who refused to bow to fear, who refused to compromise, who stood tall when others fell. Their secret was not their natural bravery, but their spiritual connection. They prayed until fear lost its voice. They prayed until courage became their second nature. They prayed until they could walk into danger knowing that even if everything else failed, God would not fail. And that is the same courage that can be yours today. Unshakable courage does not mean you will never feel afraid. It means you have learned to respond differently when fear comes. It means that instead of letting fear dictate your actions, you turn to prayer and let faith lead you. Fear may knock on your door, but through prayer, you refuse to let it move in. Fear may whisper in your ear, but through prayer, you drown it out with the promises of God. Fear may try to weaken your steps, but through prayer, you strengthen your resolve. Courage that comes through prayer is not a fleeting feeling. It is a permanent position of the heart. There will always be moments when life tries to shake you. There will be storms that test your stability, valleys that test your hope, and battles that test your strength. But when your courage has been built in prayer, you cannot be moved. The winds may blow, but you remain standing. The waters may rise, but you do not drown. The fire may rage, but you come out without being consumed. This is not because of who you are, but because of who prayer has connected you to. Prayer unites your weakness with God's strength, your frailty with His power, your fear with His faithfulness. And in that union, courage becomes unshakable. So I challenge you today to stop relying on temporary courage and begin cultivating eternal courage. Stop looking to your circumstances to give you confidence and start looking to prayer. Make prayer your first response, not your last resort. Let prayer be the place where your courage is born and reborn every single day. For when you pray, you are not just speaking words into the air. You are tapping into the very source of courage itself. You are drawing from a well that never runs dry, a strength that never fades, a power that never fails. And when you rise from that place of prayer, you will carry something the world cannot explain. You will carry unshakable courage. You will face challenges with boldness. You will walk through storms with peace. You will stand in battles with confidence. People will look at you and wonder how you remain so strong, and you will know the answer. It is not you, it is the power of prayer working in you. Prayer has made you unshakable, and nothing, no fear, no trial, no enemy can take that away.